All right, well, welcome back to Kingdom Over Coffee. This is Britt Mooney again, and I have with me here today, and I'm going to try not to butcher your name, Del Duduit. Did I do okay?
That's close. That's fine. Yeah.
How do you say it?
In Southern Ohio lingo, it's pronounced Didway. But in the French pronunciation, it's Duduit.
Duduit.
So any combination, I'm fine with. I don't care.
There's
as long as it's spelled right.
Especially when they spell it right on the check, right? As long as you spell it right on the check.
Yes.
So Del is a friend that I met, man, I'm going to say like a year and a half ago was that Cincinnati conference, maybe almost 2 years ago. I think in the fall it'll be 2 years. About 2 years ago that we met. And you and I were one of the only two men. There was like maybe I think Jake was there. And there was like two or three of us amongst a room of, I don't know, 50, 60, or maybe not that many women as a part of that writing conference up there in Cincinnati. But that was a great time. That was when I first met just a lot of people. And that really kind of helped to push me forward. And I'm sure, Del, you have a lot of the same probably story with that. I don't know. At that point, how far was Kyle already your agent at that point?
Yeah, I met Kyle back in about 4 or 5 months prior to that in Florida at the Florida Writers Conference, and when he became my agent. And that was in March of that year.
Nice.
So about 6 months later, we were at the Ohio Conference. Yeah. So and the Ohio Conference was a great conference down in Cincinnati. Last year was in Columbus. It's going to be in Columbus again this year, the second weekend in November.
Yeah. Great people up there. I have a lot of family up there in Ohio. So I have to say there's great people up there, or somebody might come down and hurt me. So Del, just tell people a little bit about yourself. I mean, obviously you're a writer. We've been talking about the writing, but tell people how you got into some of the writing and how you got into some of this writing books as you've been doing last year or two.
Yeah, from what I've told, everybody's told me Kyle, Michelle Adams, and Edie Melson, and all these folks that we've become friends with the last couple of years, that my story is a little bit unique, and I really don't have anything to compare it to. But in my conversations with other fellow authors, it is a little unique. I did not have any type of. I was a sports writer. It was my first job out of college. So I was a sports writer for a few years and a general assignment writer for a few years, and then got out of writing to try to raise a family. So I got into pharmaceutical sales. That's what I've done for the past 15, 16 years. I always wanted to do something. I always knew I had something in me to write because I enjoyed it. And I would dabble in it from here to there, write for a couple of magazines, and just to keep telling myself I'm doing something with it. And it really wasn't. I wrote for Sports Spectrum, which is a great publication. Did a couple of articles for them, and just kind of just fizzled out, lost interest. And excuse me, we had an event happen, pretty tragic event happen in our family. And so my wife told me I should write about it. And so I kind of hammered around, and I did put together a manuscript, turned into a manuscript. And I didn't know what to do with it, right? I had no idea. I didn't know the Christian writing world existed. And I always say by chance, and it's not by chance, but I did not know Michelle Medlock Adams. I didn't know anybody. We were somehow connected on LinkedIn. And I was strolling through LinkedIn one day, and I saw her profile. And I saw that we had a similar background, sports writer and some other interests. So I just sent her a message. I said, hey, I'd like to get involved in writing. How do I do this? And I prefaced it by saying, I'm not a stalker. I'm happily married. I just want some information. And a couple of days later, she responded. And that developed into a conversation. And that developed into her advice, telling me to establish a website, a Facebook page, Twitter page, do all this stuff. Start blogging regularly, and then to attend a writers conference. So, we went down and attended the Asheville Christian Writers Conference in North Carolina. Then 2 weeks later, we went to Florida at the Christian Writers Conference. That's where I met Kyle. Right. And at the first one, I actually met Michelle. And my wife and I met her, and we hit it off. And now Michelle and I are writing the book together. So that's how far it's come so quickly. But so I go down to meet Kyle at the Florida Christian Writers Conference. And I have a manuscript which I've yet to get published. The original manuscript that brought me into this world, I've yet to get published. So I had a book pitched to me by a publisher down at the conference, and that developed into what is now Dugout Devotions. And it's not that publisher published it, but it was pitched to me by a publisher down there. And so the following year at the next Florida Christian Writers Conference, we met New Hope Publishers. We met John Herring and Ramona, and they loved the book. And now it's out. Dugout Devotions is doing fantastic. And we're getting ready to launch First Down Devotions here in August. But I have a couple of books prior to that as well through Kyle. Buckeye Believers, which is a devotional based on Ohio State football. We're getting ready to have published Bengal Believer, which is devotional based on the Cincinnati Bengals. We just submitted Red Leg Believer, which is devotional about the Cincinnati Reds. We've also turned in one about the Cleveland Indians and one about the Cleveland Browns. So we've been a little busy. Those are all coming out soon. But it's all just happened within the past 2 years. I went from, it's not me I went from 0 books 2 years ago when I met Kyle to now I'll be getting my 14th contract probably this week.
If it's okay to ask, what was that tragic event? I mean, I would like to hear more of that story. Like, what was that event that really kind of turned that corner for you to say, I really have to start writing? Your wife encouraged you to write.
My sister-in-law she was 43, had her third bout with ovarian cancer, and was the first 2 times the medical world healed her, which was wonderful. The third time, she said, I'm going to trust God. And she died. And so the book is about, do we really have faith? What happens when God doesn't answer the prayer that you want him to answer? And it's kind of dark, and it gets a little rough about people sometimes getting upset with God and why he would let her die, but yet other people live. But it's a good book. It's a very inspirational book, and that was the event because she had a huge following. Her circumstance was watched by a lot of people, followed by thousands and thousands of people, and so when she died, a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, God let us down. Did God let us down?" So that's what the book. And I've got numerous titles. I've called it "Having Impossible Faith" because, we say, do we really have faith? And, do we have faith in times of trial? And when God doesn't answer your prayer the way you want it to, how do you handle it? How do you react, especially when a loved one dies, when you trusted God to deliver? And it also addresses the notion, well, she received her ultimate healing. And I do buy that, but I think sometimes that could be a cop-out. And the way you make yourself feel better, well, she got her ultimate healing, but that doesn't help her daughter, who was a senior in high school. It doesn't help her husband, who depended on her, and all her friends that say, oh, she got her ultimate healing. But that's not what you want to hear.
I think you're hitting on something that a lot of Christians and non-Christians wish there was more of an honest conversation about. Because you're right. Sometimes we give these cliches, or I don't want to call it a cliche, because there is, like you're saying, there is a truth to it. That being in the kingdom of heaven and being resurrected, in Christ is an amazing truth that we can rest in and can comfort us. But I think that it does not do away with the pain that we felt, or the grief that we still have to go through. And it's one of the things that, when I talk to people about God, that one of the things I love about God is God never dismisses people's pain. God never dismisses people's pain. And one of my favorite examples of that is, and you may have this in the book, but one of my favorite examples of that is in the Gospel of John, chapter 11, when he finally does show up, and Mary and Martha both say, if you had only been here. And I think every Christian can relate to that moment where
Yeah.
I believe in you, God, but why didn't you do this? And he doesn't put them down. He doesn't question their faith. He just receives it and he deals with it. And I think it's beautiful.
Well, one of the other characters in the book, and this is based on the lives of three people, the true lives of three people. One of the characters in the book was a rough guy. Just as rough as you can get, right? And he had pancreatic cancer, and which is basically a death wish on a man. And he came into our church, didn't know him from Adam. He was yellow. He was dying. He walked in the door like, oh my gosh, that guy's Walking Dead. He's like the Walking Dead on the show, And he went up to the altar, got saved, and claimed healing. And that was 15 years ago. He's still with us. He's still in our services. He still goes. He was a friend of mine. And he had stage 4 cancer.
Wow.
And Cleveland Clinic gave him 4 weeks. He said, go get your thing in order. You're dying. And again, that was 15 years ago. And, my sister-in-law, who was, if you would sketch out your ideal Christian, she's it. And she dies. And one of the moments in her life was she approached this gentleman who was healed and says, how did you get healed? What happened? He goes, I trusted God. And you need to too. So she did, and she died.
Wow.
So I give a review of his life and how he now feels ultimately responsible for her death. So I bring it all in a big circle because he says, why did I live?
Yeah.
And then she dies. So so it does get kind of dark. It gets kind of real about people's feelings. I mean, my assistant pastor said, he said, I have diabetes. I've claimed healing. And now he says, and I claimed healing that for my sister-in-law. She died. So does that mean I'm never going to be healed? And here's our pastor saying, I have doubts. So, it's great. It's easy to say we have faith. But do we really have faith? And how hard is it to have it? And how easy is it to have it? I mean, we cross a bridge, but we don't know who built that bridge, but we trust the people that it's going to get us to the other side. We flip on a light switch. I don't know who built my house, but I trust that the light will come on. How hard is it to trust God? So when someone dies, it's hard.
Yeah.
And that's what the book deals with. But hopefully that'll be we presented it last about 2 weeks ago down at Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference to a publisher who's interested in it.
Okay.
And we have a good feeling about it.
Good. That's great. I think it's an interesting thing to me because I've interviewed Kyle for another one of my podcasts, and he has a similar story about a tragedy in his life that kind of turned him into writing. And you don't know much about the coffee company that I work for, but it's all about trying to reach people in those broken, grieving places that a lot of times the church just doesn't want to. They don't want to take the time to deal with that. They don't want to take the time or the honesty to just be real and say, I don't know. I don't know why this happened, but it sucks, right? But it's awful, and I'm here with you,
So that was why I originally went to Florida to pitch that book, which is still out there, kind of still working on. But in the meantime, all these other books have come about. I didn't go down there to do all these devotionals.
Right.
But that's what the doors opened. And so it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, but some of that is because of your background in the sports writing field, from what I can tell.
Yeah. I'm able to get to athletes, high-profile athletes, and sit down and talk with them. And some folks I am amazed that I've been able to get to. And it's been kind of a neat 2-year run that I've been able to sit down with some of the biggest names in the professional sports world and get their testimonies. So
what are some of the things that you find when you talk to a lot of these athletes? Do you see any patterns? Do you see any or in anything that you see when you see these athletes who have faith? Because sometimes it can be very controversial, right? I mean, obviously a big name that you have interviewed, right? It was a very controversial thing sometimes for him to be so outspoken about his faith. Or have you seen some patterns in that?
Oh yeah, there's a consistent pattern that a lot of the guys say, and that's their biggest struggle is with who they are, because they're a big name and they have to realize and remember that they're they're just playing a game, and that's a normal person like you and me. But they have resources now to help them through problems, and that's a big bonus, I think. But I've been able to get to guys that I've been told no by people. I can't talk to them, but I go up and get them. So I was told no by the Yankees when I wanted to talk to Aaron Judge. But I went up to Cleveland and walked in the clubhouse and asked him for a few minutes. He said, "Sure, sit down." So we talked to Aaron Judge about his testimony, which is in Dugout Devotions. And great, because I do a lot of research on guys players who I want to talk to make sure. Because I have stumbled onto a couple who I've heard may have a testimony, but then after hearing them in the clubhouse and being around them, I'm like, nah, I don't want to talk to them. But so I am careful, and I tell them up front what I want to talk about, and most of them say, "Oh, sure, I love to talk about my faith." But I do a lot of research as well to make sure that I'm not, either catch them off guard or I'm not walking into, the one guy, he's a pretty well-known athlete. I walked up to him and said, "Hey, I want to talk about your faith. You post this a lot on Twitter." And he goes, "Nah, I'm not like that." I was like, "Okay." So I just go to the next guy.
Right.
Thank you, and move on. So, but I've been able to actually witness to a couple of guys about it. So one guy said, "I used to. I've fallen away. I don't go to church as much as I used to." I said, "Well, hey, you always can." He goes, "Oh, I know. Thank you." He said, "Appreciate the word of encouragement on there, but he said, maybe one day." So it's opened up a lot of doors for me. I made some friends through this too. I made a couple of good friends who are pretty high profile names in the sports world that I can send a text to once in a while.
Yeah. So, you mentioned some of these athletes and their struggle to kind of feel maybe humble, like a struggle with the idea of, well, I really am just a normal person that needs help like everybody else. When people cheer your name and you get paid maybe sometimes hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to basically play a game, and the sports industry in our culture is so powerful. It's such a huge part of our culture. What kind of things do they do to kind of keep themselves grounded?
A couple of them have said they have a little group that they depend on, that they have to check themselves every day. One guy says he has a checklist on his locker that says, read your Bible, pray, witness, then batting practice. So he says he's got a list. So he says, if I don't do that, I have to. He said, I have to stay grounded. I have to read my Bible every day. I have to do something every day. But then a lot of folks have these little groups that they get together with, and they encourage each other and hold each other accountable. Clint Hurdle, the Pittsburgh Pirates, says he has he called it his Mount Rushmore, where he has 3 or 4 of the men that he meets with like twice a month, has coffee or breakfast with them or lunch with them, and they hold each other accountable to what they're doing. And he said it's not a great, how you doing, let's go fishing trip. It's we saw you the other day, yell at somebody, shouldn't be doing that. He said they hold each other accountable, and that's a good thing to do. So a lot of the players do that because they're on the road a lot. So it's easy. Temptations are very easy and out there. So he said they have a group most of them have a little group that they hang with.
Do these groups travel with them, or are they groups kind of based in their hometown?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Some, there's a group, a couple of players have these little Bible studies that they just hang out with, and they'll go out to dinner together, and they'll make sure nobody gets into trouble. And if we are going in the wrong way, they reel them in. So it's very easily distracted. One guy, I won't say who it is, but he said that his biggest problem is lust. He said, I'm a young man playing baseball, I walk outside, and there's these beautiful women everywhere wanting to talk to me. And he said, it's a struggle. But he says, I have a group of guys who say, you know what, you do that, you're risking a lot. And so he said that they check each other and said they have to.
Right.
Or else it could be doomsday. It could be a lawsuit. There could be a rape allegation. There could be something going on there. And it's not just women. I didn't mean that wrong. But he told me his biggest problem is lust, and that his other guys know that. So they help each other out.
Yeah. Well, James says, confess your faults to one another, right? That you may be healed. Like there's a point of being vulnerable with people. And when you're in such a public place, I can only imagine that if you don't have a group that you can be vulnerable with, that would be a real problem, right? If you don't have people that you can just be real with, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I have that too. I mean, I'm not famous for that,
Yeah.
but like I have, I have a group of guys. I took that same advice, and I have a little group that I call once a month, just to say, this is what I've been working on. What have you been doing? What's your struggles? What have you been? What makes you happy? What's been your highlights? What's been your defeats? And we chat about that. So I kind of took that advice and formed my own little group.
That's awesome. Do you have any stories as you've been talking with people about their faith? Mm-hmm. I know when I do, just in life, right? You start opening up stories about faith and questions about faith. Sometimes you get some amazing testimonies of impacts that people have had. Do you have anything like that where you've been talking and somebody brings out just this amazing testimony?
Oh man, there's some things I've been caught off guard on, how open some of these men are. I was talking to Mr. Simber of the Indians the other day up in Cleveland. He just has a phenomenal testimony, and a lot of these guys have not the same thing, but a lot of them have struggles where they first got in the league and they get a lot of money and they make mistakes. I'm not saying he did, but a lot of his testimony was just phenomenal about how everything has to go to the Lord, because he struggled. He thought his career was over, and then he starts worshiping more and praying more, and then his career starts on a comeback, and just things like that. I had a great conversation and this is a lightning rod, with Ben Roethlisberger of the Steelers, and he opened up to me about, I wanted to talk to him about what happened to him a few years ago when his career was almost over, and possibly looking at police investigations, and he told me that he grew up in church and he knew right from wrong, and that he found himself in some sticky situations, and that he had to get back to God. And some of these guys, when they look at you and they're telling their story, and they well up, and you see their eyes get red,
right?
And they're sincere.
Yeah.
And he said, I was listening to Toby Mac sing "Lose My Soul," and he said, I was losing my soul. I had all the money in the world I want, everything I want. I was losing my soul. That's the most important thing to me.
That's right.
So he said, I had to ask God back in my life right there.
Yeah.
So, and then these guys, you don't judge them at all, but you can tell sometimes when they're talking to you about when they say certain words, like they say saved, I'm a Christian, the blood, and things like that. And you think, well, this guy knows what he's talking about. Some guys go, I love God, I love God. That's easy to say. But when they can pinpoint the moment, the day, and their experience, and they get emotional, then you kind of tend to believe them, and you kind of bear witness with them. And so that's been a lot of the fun part of it. One of my favorite interviews was Brian Dozier, who's now with the Nationals. He was with the Twins when I interviewed him. Very outspoken about his faith, does not beat a bad eye about it. He will talk to you about it anywhere, anytime, will not duck a corner at all. Loves to talk about the Lord, loves to talk about Jesus, loves to talk about a Savior. And he'll talk to anybody at any time about it. And so I've been witness to that. So we were at a clubhouse and we were talking about his interview, and great interview. And then one of his teammates walks by and he goes, hey, tell this gentleman what I like to talk about. And his teammate says, you love to talk about the Lord. I know. You love to talk about Jesus. I know. So, that's a great testimony. I mean, he can talk about anything. He can talk about his music, movies, whatever, but he also ultimately comes back to his relationship.
Yeah.
And that's a way, you can get your message out without being overbearing, without coming across obnoxious. He says, I can talk about anything, and I will, but I always full circle about the Lord. Always. And he does. He did with me. And so some of these guys are not shy about it.
Yeah, it's one of the favorite things my son has said about me, and he was saying it to somebody else. My son is 13 now. It's probably a year or two ago. He was telling one of his friends, he says, what's cool about my dad is he will start a conversation about anything, and he'll end up talking about God. He'll end up talking about how cool God is. He said, it doesn't matter what the conversation is, he will bring it around to the kingdom or to God. And it's just the way we look at life. Like when you love the Lord, just like I'm married, would I never talk about my wife? Like if I love her that much, I'm going to talk about her with people.
Yeah. So what Dugout Devotions is not a book about baseball. It's kind of a fooler there. It's a story about baseball players and how they deal with circumstances and how they, not tragedies, how they overcome issues, what they do. So I just happen to use famous players who baseball to tell their stories, and they're all different stories. They're stories, like Albert Pujols, of the legendary player of the Angels, and how he witnesses to people, and it's about Aaron Judge and what he does to witness, and it's about Brian Dozier, who I mentioned, about how he overcomes struggles, because he had a big struggle earlier in his later in his college career. So, and it's about Blaine Boyer, who's a pitcher who helps try to free girls from the sex slave industry. And so they're inspiring stories that people probably don't know about about their favorite players, but I just use the baseball players. So.
Yeah. And, I follow a lot of sports, and one of the things I love to talk about when I talk about Tim Tebow, because, he was so controversial and blah, 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 blah. And people, he cried and blah, blah. I mean, there's all this stuff. He gets all this, people give him all this flack. But I said, you know what Tim Tebow did at the University of Florida? He made giving to charity cool. He made, he changed the whole culture of a whole college. Like, yes, he was a quarterback for one of the best teams in the world in college football, if not the top team. Right? I think they won the championship at least one year, and went one or two more. But he used that position that he had to really impact literally a whole college. Like, it was cool during his 2 or 3 years there to give, to be generous, to go to charity things. And I just think, do you have any other stories like that where you've seen locker rooms change and cool vibes of just because faith has been inserted into the conversation?
Oh yeah, I've seen that on a couple of occasions. It's odd that you bring up Tim Tebow. I just recently interviewed him about 3 weeks ago up in Columbus, which was an amazing event that I was the only media person allowed to talk to him one-on-one. So we interviewed Tim. He'll be at our next Dugout Devotions Volume 2, which we're in the process of doing now. So you mentioned the charity event. I mean, we volunteer at Tim Tebow's Night to Shine every year.
Yeah.
We go volunteer for the prom for special needs children. And he's aware that we volunteer, and he thanked me for that. But I've seen a lot of athletes do things like, not similar to what Tim does, because his is huge, but a lot of athletes have a foundation that they give to, and they encourage others to give to. And some little teams have a pretty good representation of believers in the clubhouse. There's not as many as you'd think, but if you can get 4 or 5 in there, they can really have an impact, and that's a great thing. I know Clint Hurdle, the Pirates, has a foundation that helps special needs kids. I know Tebow does. Andy Dalton has a great foundation that helps children in the Cincinnati area and Texas area and their parents. So then that kind of picks up a lot of steam. A lot of folks help out of those events and give to those events because, for one, it does help. And also, for some of them, it looks good, which is a lot of these athletes have egos. So they like to have the egos stroked to make them look good. And what I like, what tells you when a player is genuine is, well, they're all genuine, but when their motives, when they don't announce what they're doing.
Yeah.
But some of these players, Christmas time, they got the TV cameras with them going into the stores, giving the kids. Well, that's great. When somebody's, you want the publicity. How about doing it without the cameras?
Yeah.
Are you doing it for the limelight, or are you doing it to give? So that's kind of not a pet peeve of mine. But if you're going to do it, don't bring CNN with you.
You're right.
Because you're looking for the gratification, looking for the applause.
Yeah.
So and it's nice to tell people you do that, but you shouldn't have to tell them. Other people should tell us for you. But a lot of these athletes do those foundations, and my interview with Tim was phenomenal. We had a good conversation, just me one-on-one, and he's a really special guy. We got along really well.
Yeah. Well, and I'm even thinking of, I'm trying to remember an example, but I'm even thinking of, I think it was like the Jets or somebody where like you could just tell, like you got stories that the whole locker room, maybe not everyone was Christian, but the whole locker room was impacted by by faith, by people of faith, just being positive and being encouraging, and that really helped them to move forward as a team.
The St. Louis Cardinals have that. A lot of believers in that clubhouse. I've been down there, interviewed 3 or 4 of their players, and then of course Mike Matheny when he was a manager, talked to him. And I've told people this. That is one of the most professional. They're all professional, but the Cardinals, there's just something different about them when you go talk in their clubhouse. They're all first class, but they are beyond first class. They are first class. How they operate and how they talk to people, and how they address people, and how they help people. So, I think that could be a lot due because there are several folks who have a profession of faith. In fact, there's 3 of them in the book Dugout Devotions. I talked to Adam Wainwright, talked to then Mike Matheny, who was then the manager of the Cardinals, and then Ryan Carpenter as well. So there's a sense when you go in there that there's something different about this clubhouse, and there's a couple of books about their faith, so it's out there. But there's something special, just different about the Cardinals when you go into the clubhouse.
Yeah, athletes and sports figures, and dealing with the money and the pride and does it come down to priorities? You were talking about the list, right? And I really like that, the list. Like, I got to do all these things and then I can do batting practice. Like, does it really come down to something that simple? That's really universal, right? It's a matter of priorities. It's a matter of, I'm a baseball player way down the list. I'm first a husband or a father or whatever. I'm a man of God. All this down the list. I'm a baseball player or football player. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, and I keep going back to certain examples, but if you go to some of these guys' Twitter pages, like Aaron Judge's Twitter page, you'll see what the first word on his Twitter page is. He says Christian. Then, the 4th or 5th word's baseball player. So he has his priorities: Christian, family, friends, baseball. And Brian Dozier said, "I happen to be I'm a Christian who happens to play baseball."
Right.
So a lot of these guys have their priorities right. They know why they're there, and a couple of them said, "Hey, I just, you have your job. Baseball's my job, but
exactly.
That's not the end of the world. If I lose my job, I'll do something else." But a lot of them are thankful they're there. The ones who are in this book have a great priority of their priorities in order, and that's why I think they're successful. I think that's why baseball is their job. It's not their life. They all know, who they're here to serve, and that once they get that priority in order. Clint Hurdle's a great example. Clint's the manager of the Pirates. We did a book signing with Clint up in Pittsburgh, and when he first came into the league, he was dubbed by Sports Illustrated as the next phenom, the next great baseball player. Back in the 70s, back he played with George Brett, back in the heyday of the Royals.
Wow.
So, but he let bad choices, alcohol and some other things kind of dampen his career. And he told me, he said, "Look, I've been up and down. I've been fired. I've been demoted. I've been traded. I've been everything you can imagine." But he said, "I had to get my life in order, and I had to become a Christian." And so once he did that, he says life was great. So he had problems, but he knows how to deal with them.
Yeah.
But so, it's a lot of the guys have priorities and they know why they're there. And again, they look at baseball as that's their job.
Yeah, what I think is healthy about that, and I think it's universally healthy, right? Because you mentioned it earlier, was one of the first things you said about identity. Who are they really? Because if your identity is in being a baseball player, how long is a baseball player's professional career, right? I mean, this is a very short amount of time if you live compared to 70, 80 years, right? But if your priority is, no, first I'm a Christian, right? That is an identity and something that will never change. That's eternal. And I just think it's very healthy.
A lot of guys have that. Benjamin Watson, who just retired from the NFL, he's in First Down Devotions. Had several conversations with Benjamin Watson. That was the first thing he said. He said, "Man, I got wrapped up in who I was, and people wanted my autograph and the pictures with me." And he said, that's easy to get wrapped up in that. And then he said his identity is not a football player. It is a Christian and a servant and a father and a son, then a football player. But Chad Pennington had a great story to tell me of the Super Bowl a couple years ago when we were up there, and he's in First Time Devotions. He said he struggled really hard when he was benched, that he lost his identity. He said for several months he wandered around saying, "Who am I? I've given my life to this game, and now I'm nobody. And how could these people bench me? How could they do this to me?" And he said he struggled with that. And then he realized, who he was and who God wanted him to be. And now what he does as his profession with the NFL, he helps players who are retiring, who are losing, who have lost their identity as a player, cope. Because he said some of these guys, that's all they do. They have the limelight and the pictures and the money and the glamour. And when it's gone, he says, then they're nobody. And he said they come crashing down. So his job as a consultant in the NFL now is to help these players realize, hey, you can do other things. You can do this, you can do that. But so he said he learned that lesson before he retired. And he said God burned out. How do you word it? He said he hated football. At one time he hated football.
Wow.
He loved it and he hated it. And then he said God burned that hate out of him to help others going through similar problems.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I think it's great. And like I said, I think it's a very universal thing. And it's great to hear that. Obviously, it's going to be more extreme when you throw more money and fame at it. But I think a lot of people deal with that, especially men. I think a lot of people deal with these issues of identity. What's the first question we ask each other as men so often, right? What do you do? Right?
What do you do for work?
And if the kingdom of God and if the God of the Bible and the New Testament teaches us anything, is you are not what you do. Like that's not where your identity. You can't earn stuff, right? And so I just think it's really healthy to have those identities in the right place.
Some of the players in this book, Dugout Devotions, I sat down personally with. Every player in this book, I sat down personally with them and talked to. There was a couple of them I did not, but had a good friend of mine and interviewed them. But like I said, Mitch Dozier and Albert Pujols. I interviewed Ben Zobrist a couple of times. Clayton Kershaw, the Dodgers, had time with him for a while. Francisco Lindor of the Indians and his testimony about how he always smiles and why he smiles all the time. Even when he's having a bad day, you always see him smiling. And he tells you why he smiles. And that's something encouraging. Aaron Judge, Andrew McCutcheon. Andrew, I got to Andrew when he was going through a tough time in his career. And Andy Pettit, I love his story about telling the truth, no matter what. I talked to Andy down in Tampa when he was named to that Mitchell report. And he had to come clean. And he said, I told the truth, even knowing that my Hall of Fame status could be in jeopardy. I told the truth. And I really admire that about him. And so that's his stories in there about how he dealt with telling the truth, even though everything was crashing down. So you got guys like that. You got, again, I mentioned Clint Hurdle, Adam Wainwright, Michael Lorenzo of the Reds. Awesome stories from Michael about how he heard a man preaching on the bay out in California, and they made fun of this guy. And they said he was high on drugs, but heard this preacher telling him that he was going to go to hell if he didn't change his ways. And he said he couldn't get away from it. So it's kind of a cool story that shared with me.
That's
And so it was a fun book to research, I guess. I went to all these baseball games, talked to all these players. I call it research.
Exactly, right? You do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life, right? Isn't that what they say?
Yeah. I've heard that.
So, although you and I both know as writers, there's a lot of work to this. This isn't. It does become work at times, as much as we love it. But it's fun. Yeah. So, where can people find the Dugout book? Dugout Devotions. I know it's on Amazon, but where else can they find it?
It's doing really well on Amazon. In fact, cracked the top 100 last week. It's on Amazon. It's at newhopepublishers.com. New Hope is all awesome to work with. I'm not just saying that because you have a relationship with them too, but New Hope Publishers and Iron Stream Media, a top-notch organization. They're on top of things. Produced a great book. They can find it at newhopepublishers.com, on amazon.com, at Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, wherever books are sold is where you'll find Dugout Devotions.
Nice.
And in the Christian bookstores as well. And then First Down will be the same thing. It launches August 5th, and it's already on pre-sale on Amazon and at New Hope. So you can find First Down Devotions officially released August 5th. And then we're going to start working on volumes 2. In fact, we've already got the audio interview done for volumes 2. So we've got another pretty good lineup coming in for volume 2. It's a pretty big name.
You got a volume 2 for both books?
We'll be having those, yeah. So I already got interviews. In fact, Tebow's going to be in volume 2 for both of them since he played both football and baseball.
Right.
Baseball, a couple of names to throw out at you. Curtis Granderson, spent some time with him. Fantastic interview, great conversation with Curtis Granderson about his testimony. Chris Davis of the Orioles, just a fantastic chat with him about his ups and downs. So those are a couple of names that will be in Dugout Devotions Volume 2. First Down Devotions Volume 2. Volume 1, we got a great all-star lineup. We have Kurt Warner. We interviewed Kurt Warner for this book.
Nice.
Ben Watson, Ben Roethlisberger, Andy Dalton, on down the line. So we have some Adam Vinatieri. So we've got some pretty big names in that book.
Nice. So, and what about for you? How can people find you? I mean, obviously you're on Facebook. We're friends on Facebook. You have author pages. You have a website. All that stuff.
Yeah, I have a website. It's DellDuduit.com, and that's spelled DELDUDUIT.com. DellDuduit.com. I blog every Tuesday. In fact, I'll be posting a blog here when we get off. Post a blog every Tuesday night. I'm on Facebook, obviously. I'm on Twitter at Dell Didway. I'm on Instagram at Dell Didway. Twitter I kind of like. I do a lot of posting there. I write for Athletes in Action. You can find me on there. You can. I'm on every Tuesday night on PJNet on Twitter, doing a live YouTube interview. We did one last week from New York with Kyle and Michelle. We got them on live from New York. That was a fun half hour. So I'll be on that tonight on PJNet.
Nice.
So about any, you just Google my name and they'll pop up about anywhere.
Did you do the cheesy thing live from New York? Did you have to, I don't know if I could have helped myself.
The guy doing the show did. Mark Prentick, he did it. So it was live from New York. And he's in Florida, but he was doing the show from Florida. But we all jumped in on the show Tuesday night at 9:30. Be on Tuesday night at 9:30 every Tuesday night. So.
Nice. Well, Dell, this has been awesome. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation. And for myself as a sports fan, and I know, my son and I sit and watch football, and I just think it's great to hear about people's faith in different contexts and how it changes them and transforms them.
My first book was Buckeye Believer about Ohio State football, and that went over really well. And we're working on some other ones, so it's be some more college football. Kyle and I just did a book together, Michigan Motivations.
Yeah.
And then Michelle and I are doing a book right now called Indiana Inspirations about Indiana basketball. So look for those next year in 2020 from Indiana Press.
It's going to be nice. Well, do us a favor and just close us out in prayer and just bless everybody as they listen, and hopefully, people were encouraged.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Our Heavenly Father, Lord, we're grateful for this time. You've been good to us. We're thankful for this opportunity to share your word. And we're thankful, Lord, that you've chosen our friends to have this platform where we can spread your word through ways that we enjoy, whether it's writing or podcasting and other forms of media outlets. We can spread the word, and that's the fun part. You're using us, and we always appreciate every opportunity that you give us. So we ask your blessings upon us, upon these shows, and upon our works that we're doing, and upon everybody who's involved in this endeavor through whether it's New Hope or the Serious Writer or some other outlets. We ask your guidance and to open doors for us to spread your word. And we ask this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, bro.
I appreciate it.